Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Celine and I'm really happy to see you again. It has been a little while since I last made a video and it's not because of some scary or horrible reason. It's literally just I have too many hobbies and I have a tendency to throw myself into one hobby and then get really into it and then sort of not lose interest necessarily, but there will be something else that's really shiny and really exciting and I will want to do that thing. But then I forget about the first thing, which is pretty much what happened with this channel. So when I would say that I have been busy in the meantime, I just mean busy as in I was having a lot of fun doing other things. But despite the many hobbies and pursuits that I have a tendency to throw myself into at any given time, I have actually been reading quite a lot over these last couple of months, and I've been missing, I've been missing making videos, and I would like to tell you a bit about the books that I have been reading recently. I'm also planning to film some videos in advance now, so it won't just be one video and then me just wandering off into full chaos again. I'm trying to be a little bit more on top of things and also to perhaps put less pressure on myself to make a video every week. At the moment I'm planning one video every 2 weeks, maybe one every 3 weeks. We'll see how it goes. I'm trying to be more consistent in my chaos, but we'll see how that goes. The first book I wanted to talk about is Middlemarch by George Eliot. Now you might remember from several months ago that I started this book and it took me several months to finish this book. Middlemarch is a Victorian novel and it is notoriously long. It's not my longest book. I actually recently bought a book that is the longest book in my collection and I will talk about it in a later video. But this book is 900 pages in my edition. And it is truly one of those Victorian novels. I think when people think about the Victorian novels, this is the kind of book that they think about. This sort of big scope, very long, lots of characters, really deep dive into some part of society type of book. And Middlemarch is definitely that kind of book. Now, when I first started reading it, I'd heard a lot about Middlemarch, and it's the second book by George Eliot that I've read. I've read Silas Marner, which is a much shorter book. And it's much more focused. And I'd heard people talk about Middlemarch and they said, such a big cast of characters, it's so sprawling. And then I started reading it and for the first 80 or 90 pages I was like, what are you guys talking about? This is just the story about two sisters. It felt really focused. However, that focus is only in the first section of the book. So if, like me, you start reading it and you're just a bit I don't understand what people are talking about when they talk about this book, it is worthwhile, if you're not super drawn into the story setup, to stick it out to see where it actually goes. So the setup is there are two sisters. One of the sisters is she's quite religious and sort of is interested in the duties of the wife, and she marries a man that is twice her age, and she foresees a future for herself where he will teach her things and she can be really useful to him. This doesn't work out the way that she wants it to. And the initial setup is very much about the relationship between these two sisters and sort of getting the story going. However, at some point, I don't exactly remember what page number or something, but at some point the story suddenly broadens and it's very much about, I would consider it, I think of Middlemarch as a tapestry. This story weaves together storylines from different couples, but it also includes politics, it includes a lot of social commentary, it looks at different people who are in different stages of their life, but also different stages in terms of class. It looks at marriage in a really interesting way. This isn't the type of book where people get married and they just live happily ever after. There are several couples in this book where it's very much about how they work through problems or don't work through problems, and I think it really reveals in a very sensitive and really subtle way, I think, how awful it actually is the way that marriage worked during this time period. Because during this time there usually wasn't much time for, say, dating, for getting to know the person. You would often only see the person perhaps, several times, and usually chaperoned. There would be other people around, and then you just decided to marry. Like, you wouldn't really know them very well. You often just based your marriage on, do they make money and do they look all right? But you often didn't really know the person. And Middlemarch is sort of like a study of what that means, particularly for women, but I also think that is very good at showing a masculine perspective on these issues as well. While I was reading this, I sort of got this thought stuck in my head that, to me, George Eliot is almost like the other side of the coin to Dostoevsky, which I know that's really out there, and if you disagree, I totally understand. But where Dostoevsky is so good at sort of digging into the self-destructive impulses of the human psyche, like he is so good at looking at addiction, cruelty, that sort of thing, and sort of the nihilistic tendencies within human nature. And I think George Eliot is almost like the other side of it. She looks a lot at kindness and connection between people. I think she's brilliant at understanding human nature, but she does look at human nature through a very compassionate lens. Now, I've also heard people say that this is the best novel that has ever been written in the English language, stuff like that. I would not go as far as that, mainly because I have no idea on what basis you would decide that something is the best novel ever written. I've read more than 1,000 books, but I still don't feel like I am capable of making that judgment. I think if you are interested in this time period, if you are interested in just sort of like the social fabric of a small English town, then I think Middlemarch is one of the best books that you can read. It is long, it does have a lot of characters, but I also think that it's very easy to become quite engaged in the story, and I did find myself, even though it did take me several months, like I was very engaged, and I never felt like when I put it down that I would forget what was going on. It hasn't quite made it to personal favourite status, but I definitely very much enjoyed my time with it. Then I also finished Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This book is written in a similar sort of time frame, but it is much, much shorter. However, it still took me a surprisingly long time to read. I have to admit, I don't think Cranford... I feel like I didn't find this book at the right time for me. I read most of it alongside Middlemarch, and I think the perspectives were so different that Cranford kind of became like the ignored cousin. Cranford originally started as like a serialized bunch of short stories, and especially at the beginning of the book you can really tell. Like it's very fragmented, and I really struggled to get into this. It's about like this little small English town, and there aren't a lot of men, like it's mainly widows, ladies, and they all visit each other, and they have sort of like a society of ladies, I guess. I also think that Gaskell is a good writer, and she's quite humorous. Like there's a lot of like that delicious irony that she has going on. But to me, there wasn't quite enough of a storyline to get really hooked on, and I didn't find the characters to be engaging. But again, I do feel like I read it at the wrong time. So while I finished it, and I did enjoy it, there were some bits of it that I thought were quite funny. But I feel like this is a book that I want to return to at a different time and hopefully maybe just enjoy and appreciate it more. There was one little passage I marked which I thought was really funny. You know that scene in Friends where they know that we know and they know, and that, yeah. If you either know the scene or you don't. And there's this sentence, it's very much about social pretensions. So it says, if she had not been assisted in private by her mistress, who sat now in state, pretending not to know what cakes were sent up, though she knew, and we knew, and she knew that we knew, and we knew that she knew that we knew, she had been busy all the morning, etc, etc. But just that little sentence just really amused me. Then I also read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Perhaps not a classic in the sense of, you know, old-timey classic, but I do think this would count as a modern classic soon. It is actually already on the classics shelves in Waterstones, so it's only been written in 1992, so does that already count as a classic? Anyway, The Secret History is very famous for, especially now, like there was suddenly like this super big interest in dark academia where it's usually an academic setting, but then there's some sort of murder or cult element or something like that. And The Secret History is usually seen as the book that originated that genre, perhaps. Something that really fascinates me about Donna Tartt as an author is that although she is a modern writer and she is still writing, she's still active, but the way that she publishes is nothing like what the normal market would demand. Usually authors will write a book a year, a book every 2 years, because there's such a pressure both from market mechanisms as well as from the publishers themselves for them to just create and create and create. Donna Tartt is someone who writes a book, takes about 10 years, publishes the book, does a couple of interviews, and then just disappears from public view again. And honestly, that sounds like the perfect way to be an author. So I have a lot of respect for Donna Tartt and how she manages to like take a decade, write the best book that she can, wins tons of prizes, and then just goes back into her writing cave once again. Anyway, back to The Secret History. I think most people probably know what this is about. So on the first page, not a spoiler because it is on the very first page, it is revealed that this group of students in like a really secluded little campus in Northern America have killed one of their fellow students. And a lot of the novel is, till about halfway I would say, is finding out why and how they did it. And then the latter half is very much about now what. What I found really interesting about The Secret History, first of all, is really well written. I think the pages turn very quickly, and I felt really compelled by the sort of psychology of this group of people and how enmeshed they became and how toxic all of those relationships were. In terms of the writing style, I felt like somehow this book was so thoroughly American, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't tell you why I would think that the writing style was American, but for some reason I was reading it and I felt like I really felt like I was in the States in some way. Like this couldn't have been set in England in this style. Again, I have no idea how to describe that to you, but it felt really real. It felt really like Donna Tartt knows how to describe space, describe relationships between people in a way that felt very specific within this context. It reminds me a little bit of how Stephen King is just so good at capturing the voices of working class America. And I think Donna Tartt did something really similar for college students in Northern America at this time. This was really well written. It felt like a sort of psychological thriller, so it really has that, oh, I really need to know what happens next feeling. I know that some people don't really like the latter half, because you sort of know what has happened. And now it's more about, you know, will they get caught? What will the social consequences be? What will happen next? And I actually found myself really interested in that. Like, I'm quite interested in what does it do to a person psychologically to have murdered someone that they know. In terms of this book being the starting point of dark academia, while it is most definitely set in the college experience, I actually wanted to know a bit more about their classes. Like their classes, they're all in the super exclusive Greek major degree, whatever you call it in the States. And I just wanted to know more. Like, I was really curious about that part, and that wasn't really something that was satisfied. Which is fine. I know that I'm just a massive nerd, so I understand that that might not make it into this book. Oh well. I really enjoyed it, and I'm kind of curious to perhaps explore more in the dark academia genre, because I'm quite interested in books about universities because I spent so much of my own life at university. So those were just 4 books of all the books I've read over the last couple of months, so it's going to take me a couple of videos to like slowly work through them. However, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you read any of these books. Let me know if you agree or disagree. All opinions are welcome. I'm very glad that you're here. I'm very glad that I'm here. And I hope to see you again in a new video soon. Bye!